Hey there everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video we're going to be battling off state management systems in React, specifically React context and Recoil. Let's jump right into it. Okay, so for the purposes of this video, I want to show you where we're going to end off with. Something like this on the right, as you see over here. What we have going on is on the left, we have React context, and on the right, we have Recoil. And I set this up in a way for React DevTools to highlight places that are getting re-rendered, because we want to also see Recoil's claims for performance, right? So over on the left, we can toggle a to-do. So if we toggle this, we see that there are outlines that are showing up on the components that are re-rendering. And also, if you notice that there's a slight outline outside on the entire app, which is pretty oof. There's an outline on the entire app. So now let's go on the right. We have over here, we have Recoil. And let's toggle this over here. And if you notice, it's only toggling what it needs. There's much fewer boxes that is getting re-rendered. And this outside of this, the border of this application on the right is also not going up, which means it's not re-rendering the entire app for no reason. Just to show also a little bit of performance timing, let me just snap this full and let me pull up React Profiler over here and let me record this once, hit that and then stop. Let's go on the biggest one. So the biggest one, render duration was about 22 milliseconds, which is pretty acceptable. 22 milliseconds is really good. So you want to keep that under 30 frames per second. Sorry, you want to keep that over 30 frames per second, which it is doing. Let's open this one over here and let's see what React Recoil, I shouldn't call it React Recoil, what Recoil is just doing as well. So if we go to our profiler over here, so I hit the recording button over here and then hit that and then stop profiling. And we go over here and this is slightly better performance. It's about 3 milliseconds shorter. Again, this is a very small app, so the differences won't be noticeable right now. It's super basic. But if you see the tree chart over here of what's getting re-rendered, this is huge. Look at that. We're not even touching this piece over here. We're touching so many components just to do one simple thing. It's super great. So let's go into the examples right now. Okay, so I just want to mention that I made a little small server over here in Express. So essentially the server, you can get your to-dos, you can post new to-do, you can delete a to-do, and you can update a to-do. And for updating, I mean toggling it to complete or not. So it's just a small Express server that I have. Most of my code, or most of the code that we'll be concerned with, is over here. So let's go through what's going on, right? So we have our main app component. Our app component is just rendering our to-dos. So if we go to our to-dos over here, we have our usual React setup at the top. We have our use context over here, and we're pulling that into the to-do count. So we have a to-do count, add to-do, and to-do list over here. And so if we go into our add to do, that is just our little input box that we have. And what else do we have? We have our to do, add to do, our to do count, which is just going to display the count of the number of to dos that we have. And then finally, the last thing we have is our to do list. Now, this is the main piece that's getting re-rendered over and over again. So it's just our form group with our cards and a bunch of to-dos getting re-rendered over here. So let's actually go through creating the context provider over here. So inside our folder context over here, I'm just going to create a todo.tsx over here. And this is where we're going to put all our state for our to-dos, right? We can update, delete, and add to-dos. So let's just import React from React. And we also need a few more things. We need use context. We need our create context, and we need our use effect. We will need that soon, and we will need use state over here. So now let's create our interface that we are going to use for our to-do. So our to-do over here, it has an ID, and it's going to be optional because as we're creating a to-do, we don't have the ID. We're actually going to make the request to the server, and the server is going to give back our to-do with the ID. That's going to be optional. So we're going to have a text, which is going to be a string, and then we also have a done, and this is going to be a boolean, right? So now let's create our interface for our state for our context provider. So we have is loading, which is a boolean. We have our list of to-dos, so that's going to be an array of I to-do, and we have our to-do count with our number over here. We also need a few helper functions, so we need our add to-do over here, which is just going to be take in a to-do, and I interface to-do as well. So all of this is going to be similar, so I'm just going to copy this over. So for adding, deleting, updating, all it's going to do is take in a to-do and then perform some action. So add and update. Cool. So we have our interface over here. So now let's create our actual context. So this is going to be our to-do context, which is equal to create context, and it's going to have a state. Its type's going to be a state or undefined, and initially it's just going to be undefined over here. Cool. So now let's create our hook that we can get our to-do. So use to-do is equal to a function, and all we're going to do in here is get our context. So our context is equal to, let's just import that in. So use context, and we're going to take our to-do context over here. And if our context is undefined, so I'll just do that, then just throw a new error. And it's just going to be something helpful saying use to-dos can only be used inside a to-do provider, right? So this is just the general setup when it comes to creating your own context. It's really good to throw errors if your provider is not wrapping any of the components that are that are using this. So now we can return context safely because we know if it's undefined, then we can throw an error, and that's about it. So now let's create our provider. So to-do provider is equal to just a arrow function, and we're gonna start doing what context providers do. So we're gonna create our to-dos. We're gonna set the to-dos over here, and that is equal to use state, and it's just going to be an empty array, and I will just type this with the I to do over here, right? Also, I want to keep track of the loading state because we're going to make an API call to our server, and we want our components to know when it is loading and when it isn't loading. So this will just be a use state, and this is going to be true because initially on mounted it's just going to be loading. So now let's create our use effect that's going to run when the component is mounted. So we're going to try to fetch our data. So we know set loading is true, so we're not going to change that here. All we're going to do is fetch from our URL. So now I'm just going to create a const URL over here, and this is going to be our server. So the server that I have is http localhost 3003 /to-dos. That's going to be our endpoint to do all our stuff. And then just for the sake of it, I need to make some headers as well. So content type is application / JSON. Okay, so now we got all our stuff. So now I can just plop this in URL, and we have to create an object over here. So the method is going to be get, right? And we need to put in our headers, and we're just going to pass in our headers over here that we created at the top. We don't need to pass a body because we're just trying to get something. We're not getting something specific. We're just getting all the resources. So now when fetch is done, fetch returns a promise. So we do have to catch it with the then. So I'll just say result and then res.json. I don't really care about catching errors at this point because I know that it's always going to pass. But and it's always best practice to actually do it. Okay, so it's going to be our to-dos now. So our to-dos over here, I will just type this as well because this is actually any right now. So array of I to-dos. Always good to type, folks. Can I find I to, okay, because it's just to-do. Oh, wait, why is this I to-do over here? Oh, it's coming in from this. Okay, so this is incorrect. Okay, so we type it as I to do over here, and now we just have to set the to-dos over here and just say set our to-dos and then set loading to false. Okay, so now this is going to handle our part where we initially load. So I'm just going to export this component as well. So export default to-do provider. And now let's create a bunch of our helper functions. So we said we're gonna add a to-do, right? So this is just gonna be an arrow function, and it's gonna take a to-do. I'll just say to-do, and it's gonna be an I to-do over here. So now let me just copy this and paste this twice, because one of it is going to be add, update, and delete, right? I just want to simulate a basic CRUD application. So now I got my delete, my add. I'm just going to copy paste this and change it afterwards. So for adding, we actually have a method of post, and our headers is going to say the same. We just need to add a body now. So the body is just going to be the to-do that's being passed in. So that's the to-do being passed in, and then our server is going to return the to-do back with our ID. So this is just going to be a one to-do over here. Also, I feel like to-do is going to lose its meaning by the end of this video. So we want to set our to-dos. So we get our previous values, we're going to spread it over here, and we're going to pass in our new to-do as well. Loading, we don't really care about this, that's fine. Okay, so now let's do the same thing for update and delete. So update is a put request, and we are sending in the same to-do, and we need to update that specific to-do for that ID. So what we need to do actually here is some extra work. So we do need to modify that specific to-do. So I'll say previous.map, and we're going to get our previous to-do, and if the previous to-do's ID does not equal to the new to-do that just got created, so to-do.id, if it does not equal that, if they aren't the same, then it's not the one being modified. So then we just want to return the old one. Else we want to add in the new one, so that the new one is just going to be to-do over here. And also I can just make this into one function because it's just returning that, and that is fine. Cool. So now let's finally create our delete to-do over here. So this is going to be a delete request. And what we're going to do is, it's actually the URL with the ID at the front. So I need to do some template literals and just pass the ID over here. So I'll just do that and todo.id. And I just realized that updating is the same URL as well, because we need to know the specific resource that we're updating. And then we also don't need this, because we're not telling it what to do, what to update it as. It's just toggling it from what it was. So that's pretty much context providers over here. The last thing we need to do is create our provider and then pretty much wrap it. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So what's gonna happen here is that we return our context. So our to-do context over here dot provider, and it's going to take in a value. So I'll just leave that empty for now, and we're just going to pass in our props as well. So the props will also include any of the children that is nested underneath the to-do. So we just need to take our props over here, and this prop, let me just make this a react.functional component, so that now this has a children prop, and that works fine. So now we need to pass in our value. So the value we typed it is this. It contains loading, it contains our to-dos, it contains the count, and it contains the three functions that help us do what we need to do. So what I'm going to do is just say const value is equal to to-dos. It's equal to the to-do count, which is just going to be to-dos.length. And where it's going to be our add to do, our update to do, and it's going to be our delete to do, right? And then we just pass our value in here, and that should, there's probably something missing. Oh yeah, is loading. So we just need to pass is loading as well. I pass that as the first one. It doesn't matter the order in which you pass this in. It's personal preference. So is loading over there. Cool. So now we got our value, we got our context provider over here. So now we need to wrap our app in this context provider. So we exported it over here. Let's go back to our app over here. We need to get our context provider. So we are to-do provider, and it's going to be these ones over here. So save that. So now let's go into our app, right? So we go into our app, here's our to-dos. We go into our to-dos over here, and it's pulling in our use to-do hook. So if we go up over here, it's use to-dos. Let's go back over inside our context, because there is an error over here. So our context over here is use to-dos, and we're not exporting this, that's the problem. So we'll export const use to-dos, and now the error goes away. So now we have access to all of the state within our context. So all of the stuff we declared over here and pass it into value, we now have access to it over here. For example, if we say to-dos, see we have our to-do state, we have our to-do count, we have our add to-do, and all that stuff. We have it all, right? So this is our is loading, so we need that. I'm just going to delete some of the useless code over here, and let me save that. And that's pretty much it. So here we have our to-do count. We can go in this component once more. It's just our typography component from Material UI, just a very easy, simple library to use for UI components. Again, if we need to leverage state from our context, right, we have all this declared to-dos and our updaters. We need to pull in our used to do hook to get our value. So in this case, I'm getting my to-do count and displaying it. So I'll save that, I'll close it. Let's go to add to do. And again, the same thing, we need those that add to do function from our provider, from our context provider. So the way we access that is again through our hook that we created over here. We are just grabbing the context over here, and if it is undefined, this is just a check to see if it's properly nested within our provider that we put at the very top of our application. It throws an error, otherwise it returns all the state. So our add to do over here, we take our add to do, we create a text field, and on change of the text field, we set our React state. If you're a React developer, you already know this. And then finally, when the button is clicked to add the to do, then we send it to this function, which we created in our context provider over here. So if we go over here, we add it all up, and we update our state for our to-dos. And this is about 96 lines of code to do this kind of stuff. This is very boilerplatey. This is almost necessary. Like, all this stuff is necessary to do, especially if you're a good React TypeScript developer. So make sure you use TypeScript. Okay, so we have our add to-dos, and then finally our to-do list. Over here, we're just getting our to-dos, all our to-dos from our state, and we are just iterating over them using map, and then we are passing it into our to-do component, which is just going to display things. So if we go in here, our to-do component, let's say this says toggle to-do, but actually it's called update to-do. So I just need to swap that in over here. So inside our to-do component, we're just going to be doing two things, deleting it and updating it. So we update it to the opposite value for done, and then we delete it over here. So we have an icon button over here. So let's do a yarn dev, and let's see what we have going on. So let me open this, close this, restart it over here, make sure we don't have any console errors, and let's hello new to do, and let's add that, and that adds a new to do over here. Say make YouTube video, and add that, and over there we have make to do YouTube a video. So if we open our network tab over here, we see this is actually making requests. So if we delete a to do over here, it's deleting it, but it's not updating it. Oh yeah, we didn't fix that part. I don't think we fixed that part. So let's do that. So if we go back over to our context, we delete our to-do, and it doesn't really return us a body, right? We're doing json.res over here. We don't really need to do this. And we don't need to send a body because we're just deleting it from our URL. So what's going to happen is it's just going to be an empty arrow function, because what we're going to do is we're going to see this to do over here, and if the ID blah 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 is not equal to that, then it should update it. And the same thing with here as well. Our put is it returning? Yeah, our put is actually returning. So if we go back over here, our put request is returning our to do. Yeah. Okay, so now this should work. Let me save this, and let me open this up, restart, and let me delete the to do. So it deleted it, but it's not updating. Is that what's going on? Let's see. The wonders of software development. So we delete our to-do. Oh, we're mapping over it. We actually need to filter it at this point. So what we're doing now is that if any of the previous to-dos don't equal to the one that is deleted, then we want to keep them. So we're just we're just returning true, so it keeps them. So now if we save that and go back over here, refresh, hit delete, yep, and that deletes it, that deletes it, that deletes it. If we refresh our page, we get the same amount of to-dos that we have. So again, this seems really cumbersome, right? Like, I add this and everything updates. I make a simple toggle here, and it's updating everything, including this, which is not very performant once you get to a bigger size application. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our context provider that we made, and we're going to port it over to what Recoil would have. It's what Recoil would have in equivalent to this. So let's go into it now.